I wake up at 4:30 in the morning now. That is what happens when you get old and you have nothing to wait for. The body just gives up on sleep. My wife used to say I slept like a dead man. Now I lay there in the dark and listen to the furnace kick on and off, and I think about all the things I should have seen. This morning I made coffee like I always do. Black, no sugar. The same mug I have used for 22 years. It says World's Greatest Grandpa on the side. My daughter gave it to me after my first grandson was born. His name is Caleb. He is 11 now. I have not seen him in 14 months. I sat down at the kitchen table and looked at the calendar on the wall. It still has a picture of a fishing boat on it from 2 years ago. I never bothered to flip it to the new year. What is the point? Nobody comes over to look at it anyway. My name is Tom. I am 68 years old. I live alone in a 3-bedroom house in the suburbs outside Columbus, Ohio. The house is paid off. I worked 37 years in an auto parts warehouse to pay for it. I lifted heavy boxes on a concrete floor until my knees turned to gravel and my back went out more times than I can count. But I did it. I gave my family a home. My wife Nancy and I raised 2 children in this house, a daughter named Krista and a son named Ben. Krista is the oldest. She is 41 now. Ben is 37. They were good kids. At least I thought they were. Nancy died 5 years ago. Cancer. Pancreatic. It took her in 9 weeks from the diagnosis to the funeral. I held her hand at the end. She weighed maybe 90 pounds. Her skin was yellow. She looked at me and said, "Take care of our babies." I promised her I would. That promise is what broke me. After Nancy passed, I fell apart for a while. I drank too much. I stopped cooking. I let the yard go to weeds. But then Krista came over one day with Caleb, and she said, "Dad, you cannot live like this." She was right. So I pulled myself together. I started going to church again. I joined a grief group at the community center. I got better. Krista and her husband Mark lived about 20 minutes away in a newer development. Mark sells insurance. He is one of those guys who smiles too much and shakes your hand too hard. I never disliked him, but I never quite trusted him either. He always looked at things like he was calculating the value, my daughter included. Ben lived in Cincinnati with his wife Rachel. They had 2 little girls, Sophie and Mia. I saw them maybe 3 times a year. Ben is a quiet guy. He works as an electrician. He takes after me that way. He fixes things. He does not talk much about how he feels. I wish I had taught him to open up more, but I never learned how to do it myself. For 2 years after Nancy died, things were okay. Lonely, but okay. I had a routine. I went to breakfast at the diner on Tuesdays with some guys from the warehouse. I went to church on Sundays. I babysat Caleb on Fridays when Krista and Mark went out to dinner. I was the fun grandpa. I made pancakes shaped like dinosaurs. I let him stay up too late. I taught him how to fish at the pond behind the hardware store. Then Mark started coming over alone. He said he wanted to spend time with me, man to man. He said he lost his own father when he was young, and he always wished he had a father figure to learn from. I was flattered. I am an old man. Having my son-in-law want to be around me felt good. We would sit in the garage and drink beer, and he would ask me questions about my life, my childhood, my first job, how I met Nancy, how I saved up to buy the house. I told him everything. I thought he cared. He started talking about retirement planning. He said I should think about my estate. He said it was important to have everything in order so that when I passed, the kids did not have to deal with probate court. He said he could help me set up a trust. He had done it for his own mother before she died. It made things so much easier, he said. No fighting, no lawyers, just a clean transition. I told him I did not have much to leave. Just the house, a small life insurance policy, about $60,000 in a 401k from the warehouse. Nothing special. He said that was exactly why I needed to protect it. Every dollar matters, he said. You worked too hard to let the government take a cut. So I let him help me. He brought over a lawyer friend of his.
A man named Doug who had an office in a strip mall next to a mattress store. Doug was young and clean-shaven and spoke very fast. He explained everything in terms I did not fully understand, but Mark was there, nodding along. Mark said it was all standard. He said every smart family did this. I signed the papers in my own kitchen with a cup of coffee in my hand. I did not read every page. I trusted my son-in-law. I trusted my daughter. I thought that is what family was for. That was 3 years ago. The first crack came about 6 months after I signed the papers. I was at Krista's house for Caleb's birthday party. It was a backyard thing with a bounce house and too much sugar. I was standing by the grill flipping burgers when I overheard Mark talking to his brother on the phone. He was standing near the garage with his back to me. He did not know I was there. He said the house will be ready by spring. He said we just have to wait for the old man to kick it or put him in a home. I froze. The spatula in my hand felt heavy. I thought maybe I misheard him. Maybe he was talking about something else. But I knew. Deep down, I knew what I heard. I just did not want to believe it. I did not say anything that day. I hugged my grandson. I ate cake. I drove home and sat in my truck in the driveway for an hour. I told myself I was being paranoid. I told myself Mark was a good guy. I told myself I was just a lonely old man looking for problems where there were none.
That was the first time I lied to myself. The second crack came a few weeks later. I was balancing my checkbook like I have done every month since I was 22 years old. I noticed a withdrawal from my savings account that I did not recognize. It was for $3,000. The memo line said, legal fees. I called the bank. The woman on the phone told me the withdrawal was authorized by my daughter, Krista. She had power of attorney. I did not remember giving Krista power of attorney. I went back through the papers Mark had me sign. I found the page. It was buried in the middle, small print, legalese. But it was there. I had given my daughter full control over my finances if I became incapacitated. But the papers also said something else. They said Mark and Krista were listed as co-trustees of my living trust. They could access my accounts at any time. They did not need my permission. I called Krista. She did not answer. I called Mark. He did not answer. I left a message asking about the $3,000. Nobody called me back for 3 days. When Krista finally called, she sounded annoyed. She said the money was for updating the trust documents. She said it was routine. She said I was overreacting. I asked her why I had not been told about the withdrawal. She said she had mentioned it at dinner last month. I told her I had not been to dinner at her house in 2 months. She got quiet. Then she said she must have forgotten to mention it. That was the first time I looked at my daughter and saw a stranger. Things got worse after that. The calls came less often. The visits stopped. Caleb stopped coming over on Fridays. Krista said he was busy with soccer and piano and tutoring. She said he did not have time for Grandpa anymore. I showed up at their house one Saturday afternoon with a bag of candy for Caleb. Mark answered the door. He did not invite me in. He stood in the doorway with his arms crossed. He said now was not a good time. He said Krista was resting. He said maybe I should call before coming over. I stood on the porch of my daughter's house like a salesman nobody wanted to talk to. I handed him the candy and walked back to my truck. On the drive home, I started crying. I am not ashamed to say it. I pulled into the parking lot of the grocery store and I sat there with my hands on the steering wheel and I sobbed like a child. I missed Nancy so bad it felt like someone was squeezing my heart. I needed her to tell me what to do. I needed her to tell me I was not losing my mind. But she was gone, so I had to figure it out alone. Ben called me that night. He said Krista had called him. She said I was acting strange. She said I was accusing Mark of things that were not true. Ben asked me what was going on. I told him everything. The papers, the money, the phone call I overheard at the birthday party. Ben was quiet for a long time. Then he said, "Dad, I think you need to talk to a lawyer." So I did. I found a lawyer named Mrs. Patricia Holloway. She was 65 years old, with gray hair and glasses on a chain, and an office downtown that smelled like old books. She did not smile much. She asked me to bring her all the documents Mark had me sign. She read them for an hour while I sat in a leather chair and watched the rain run down her window. When she finished, she took off her glasses and looked at me with something I had not seen in a long time. Compassion. Real compassion. She said, "Tom, I need to ask you a difficult question." I said, "Okay." She said, "Did you know you transferred the deed to your house into the trust?" I said, "Yes. That was the point. To protect it." She said, "The trust is controlled by your daughter and her husband. They have the authority to sell the house without your permission. They can do it tomorrow if they want to." I felt the room get smaller. I said, "But I am still alive." She said, That does not matter. The way these documents are written, you gave up ownership the day you signed them. The house no longer belongs to you. It belongs to the trust, and the trustees are Krista and Mark. I asked if I could undo it. She said, not without their cooperation or a court order. I sat in that chair for a long time. I thought about Nancy. I thought about the down payment I saved for 5 years to buy this house. I thought about the roof I replaced myself in the summer of 2003. I thought about the backyard where I taught Ben to ride a bike. I thought about the front door I carried Nancy across when we first moved in. I thought about how my daughter had taken all of that from me with a few strokes of a pen. Mrs. Holloway asked if I wanted to pursue legal action. I said I needed to think about it. I drove home and did not sleep that night. I sat in my recliner and stared at the wall. The furnace kicked on and off. The refrigerator hummed. The house was so quiet, I could hear my own heartbeat. The next morning, I drove to Krista's house. I knocked on the door. Mark answered again. I asked to speak to my daughter. He said she was busy. I said I was not leaving until I talked to her. Krista came to the door. She looked tired. She looked like she had not slept either. She stepped outside and closed the door behind her. We stood on the front porch like two people who used to know each other. I asked her why. She did not pretend to be confused. She knew exactly what I was asking. She looked at the ground for a long time. Then she said, "Dad, you are not going to live forever. Mark and I have 2 kids. We need to think about their future. The house is just sitting there. You are alone in that big house while we are squeezed into a 4-bedroom with no room for anything." I said, "You have a 4-bedroom house for 4 people." She said, "Caleb needs his own space, and we want to have another baby. We need a bigger house. We found one we love, but we cannot afford it without selling your place." I asked her where she expected me to live. She said there is a nice assisted living facility across town. It is called Maplewood. We already looked into it. Your Social Security would cover most of the cost, and with the money from the house, we could pay for the rest. She said it like she was doing me a favor. I asked her if Nancy would have wanted this. She flinched. For just a second, I saw something behind her eyes. Guilt, maybe, or sadness. But then it was gone. She straightened her back and said, "Mom is not here. We have to make practical decisions." I turned around and walked back to my truck. I did not say goodbye. I did not say I love you. I just walked away. That night I called Ben again. I told him what Krista said. He was silent for a minute. Then he said, "Dad, pack a bag. I am coming to get you." He drove up from Cincinnati the next morning, 4 hours in his old Ford pickup. He knocked on my door at 9 a.m. He hugged me. He did not say much. He just helped me pack a suitcase and put my important papers in a box and loaded everything into his truck. He said, "You are staying with us for a while." I asked, "What about the house?" He said, "Let Krista and Mark figure that out. You are not going to Maplewood." I cried again. Right there in my own driveway. Son held me while I cried. He smelled like motor oil and coffee. He was solid. He was real. He was the only thing I had left. I stayed with Ben and Rachel for 6 weeks. They put me in the guest room. Sophie and Mia called me Grandpa every morning. Rachel made me breakfast. Ben took me to the hardware store, and we bought wood to build a birdhouse in his garage. For a little while, I felt like a human being again. But I could not stay forever. Ben and Rachel had their own lives, their own struggles. I could see the stress on Rachel's face. 5 people in a 3-bedroom house is too many. The girls were sharing a room. Money was tight. Ben was working overtime just to keep up. So I called Mrs. Holloway. I told her I wanted to fight. She filed a petition to remove Krista and Mark as trustees. She argued that they had breached their fiduciary duty by attempting to force me out of my home and by using trust funds for unauthorized legal expenses. The case went to court. The hearing was in a gray building with fluorescent lights that hummed. I wore my only suit, the one I wore to Nancy's funeral. Krista and Mark sat on the other side of the room with their own lawyer. Krista would not look at me. Mark sat there with that smile like he had already won. The judge was a woman named Hernandez. She asked a lot of questions. She asked Krista about the $3,000 withdrawal. Krista said it was for legal fees related to the trust. The judge asked to see receipts. There were none. She asked Mark about his phone call with his brother. My lawyer had submitted an affidavit from me about what I overheard. Mark denied it. He said I was old and confused. He said I had memory problems. He suggested I might not be competent to manage my own affairs. That was when I realized what they were doing. They were not just trying to take my house. They were trying to take my dignity. They wanted the world to believe I was a senile old man who did not know what he was doing. Mrs. Holloway was ready for them. She had a letter from my doctor saying I was mentally fit. She had bank records showing I had managed my own finances without issue for 5 decades. She had testimony from the guys at the warehouse who said I was sharp as a tack. But the judge did not rule that day. She said she needed time to review the evidence. I went back to Ben's house and waited. 3 weeks later, the decision came. The judge removed Krista and Mark as trustees. She voided the power of attorney. She ordered them to repay the $3,000. She ruled that the house had to be transferred back into my name. I won. But winning did not feel like winning. When I got my house back, I walked through every room. The kitchen where I made pancakes for my grandchildren. The living room where we opened presents on Christmas morning. The bedroom where Nancy took her last breath. Everything was still there. The furniture, the photos, the memories. But something was missing. The life, the warmth, the people who were supposed to love me. Krista called me the day after the ruling. She was crying. She said, "Dad, I am so sorry." She said Mark pushed her into it.
She said she never wanted to hurt me. She said she was weak and scared, and she did not know how to say no to him. I listened to her cry. I wanted to feel something. Pity, anger, love, anything. But I just felt empty. The part of me that was her father had been hollowed out. She had taken a knife to it herself. I said, "I forgive you, but I do not know how to forget." She asked if she could bring Caleb to see me. I said yes. She never did. That was 2 years ago. I still live in the same house. I still wake up at 4:30 in the morning. I still make coffee in the same mug. I still sit at the kitchen table and look at the calendar with the fishing boat on it. Ben calls me every Sunday. He drives up once a month with Sophie and Mia. We build things in the garage. We eat dinner at the diner. We do not talk about Krista. There is nothing left to say. Caleb turned 11 last month. I sent him a card with $20 inside. I do not know if he got it. I do not know if he remembers the pancakes shaped like dinosaurs. I do not know if he remembers the pond behind the hardware store where we used to catch bluegills together. I hope he does, but I will never know. Last week I went to the grocery store. I was buying milk and bread. I turned the corner, and there she was, Krista, pushing a cart with a little boy I did not recognize. A new baby, the one she said she wanted. She saw me. Our eyes met. For a second, neither of us moved.
Then she looked down at the little boy and turned the cart around and walked the other way. I stood there in the cereal aisle holding a loaf of bread. A woman pushing her own cart stopped next to me. She asked if I was okay. I said, "Yes, ma'am, just tired." She smiled and walked away. I finished my shopping. I paid. I walked to my truck. I sat in the driver's seat for a long time. I thought about Nancy. I thought about the promise I made to her. Take care of our babies. I tried, Nancy. I really did. But sometimes your babies grow up into people you do not recognize. Sometimes they take everything you gave them, and they turn it into a weapon. Sometimes you have to let them go because holding on will destroy what is left of you. I drove home. I put the milk in the refrigerator. I made a cup of coffee. I sat in my recliner and looked out the window at the backyard. The birdhouse Ben and I built is still hanging on the oak tree. The paint is peeling now. The roof is crooked, but it is still there. It is still standing. I guess that is something. I have not heard from Krista since that day in the grocery store. That was 8 months ago. Maybe she will call someday. Maybe she will show up at my door with Caleb and the new baby and say she is sorry again. Maybe we will find a way back to each other. Or maybe I will just keep waking up at 4:30 in the morning, making coffee, sitting in the quiet, waiting for the phone to ring. The phone does not ring. I am 68 years old. I have a son who loves me, 2 granddaughters who call me grandpa, a house that is paid off, a truck that still runs, a birdhouse that needs a new coat of paint. That is more than some people get. But when I lay down at night, I still reach for Nancy on the other side of the bed. I still listen for her breathing. I still remember the way she smelled like lavender and the sound of her laugh when I told a stupid joke. And I wonder if she can see me from wherever she is. I wonder if she knows what happened. I wonder if she is disappointed in me for not fixing it. Or maybe she is disappointed in Krista. I will never know. All I know is that I am an old man in a quiet house with a mug that says "World's Greatest Grandpa." And most days, I do not feel very great. Most days, I feel like a ghost in my own life, watching from a distance, remembering when the rooms were full of noise and love and people who needed me. Now they do not need me anymore. Now I am just here, waiting for the phone to ring.